Now, as you grew up with your sibling, Katie, was there any experiences for you that made you realize that you have a sibling that possibly society might not quite understand as well as you do as a sibling?
Growing up, it wasn't as much. Initially, and like especially as we were younger, I think it was less immediately appreciative of the possibility that there was a gender aspect to it as much as just a sexuality aspect to it. That Katie came out of the closet as gay originally in high school, and as going farther down the path of discovering and identifying and appreciating exactly, really who Katie was, came out to explain that much more to the family and friends of exactly how Katie identified. That early on, because I think at that age especially, this was, to show my age, it was over 25 to 30 years ago, that we're just getting into elementary school, and at that time there was no concept of, at least for myself, the differences and or possibilities of how somebody would identify, and so nothing ever stood out as possibly different in that way, but there were signs, or whatever you want to call them, that Katie wasn't towing any kind of social norm line, or the fattest, thickest lines that are out there right now that are generally have been boxing people in. That there were definitely plenty of instances where we feel like, I think the whole family would know, to say that Katie's on an alternative side, according to the social norms, and one of in the classic kind of "how come I was the last one to know when I came out" scenario,
Yeah,
was how it worked. There was it was "I need you to sit down," and there was "oh great, here we go." I was like, I know what this is now. I know what's coming, and it was very emotional and difficult for Katie to go through it all for us. But I think the whole family, my mother, my father, myself, we were all like, "Oh yeah, the whole time," and I'd always had some kind of an appreciation for that. And I think as far as the dynamic of our relationship in the world of gender or really anything, for myself, it's because the doctor got it right, or just because I'm also very stereotypically blonde-haired, blue-eyed, 6 feet, male, Caucasian, middle class, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that things don't, there isn't a lot for me to generally in my personal life appreciate as difficult in the way that it would be for anyone that didn't fit the most prototypical mold of the most privileged potential person out there. That our dynamic of our relationship is significantly more educational when it comes to the world of gender and identity. That
now, can I interrupt for just a second? So about the education part of it, because this is something that I think that's the whole crux of this show, is 100% education, 100%. And I kind of think that education is a two-way street. There is the ability for a person to give information about themselves, but then there's the onus of the recipient of that information to go do studying on their own. And I feel like that's where a lot of times the ball is dropped in our world, is like, I can give you all the education that I can about who I am as a human being, but can you please, there's this fancy thing called Google, can you type into it and do a little bit of research on your own? And I'm curious, I'm going to come to you in just a second, Katie, because this is going to be directed pretty much towards you with what you're planning on doing in the future. But where did you go for your resources and your research on your own, rather than coming to Katie all the time? Because there's other siblings out there that I guarantee you that are like, I don't know where to look. What do I do? How did you go about finding this information?
I mean, you nailed it with Google. I'm also lucky enough to have access to Katie's Facebook page, which has links aplenty to all sorts of things that can keep you that much better educated about any of it. That for me, when Katie would let our family know, or let family and friends know that this is how these are pronouns that I would prefer to be known by, also would go that much farther to say these are other options that are out there for other people, that whether it directly applied to Katie or anybody else, it was worth understanding, because I felt like because it was never any contention, or there was never any you know, it wasn't a fear or anything learning these things, or allowing or witnessing Katie.
So you weren't afraid of what you might find?
No, not at all. And it was always great, you know, but like knowing that as different from me as Katie would be in those regards, there's a million other people that are just as different from either of us, that that I'm just as likely to run into in a professional or social situation at some other point. That it's easier, certainly for me, growing up and having access to Katie, and to ask people, you know, how do you identify, if there's you know, if that's the topic of conversation, what do you prefer, just to know that there's other ways for us to talk to each other, and how, you know, to be that much better educated in the world of knowing that maybe, you know, that I could do a better job of helping somebody, you know, feel more comfortable by referring to them as they would prefer to be referred to.
It's amazing, that one little simple thing of getting a pronoun the way the person wants it and deserves it, how much that's dignity. You're showing that's an act of dignity. I'm respecting and dignifying that who you think you are is legitimate, and I agree with you. And that's, for me, the beauty of a pronoun.